welcome. event. To the Microsoft team. Very first Microsoft event. you're definitely not wasting your time. So please pay attention to the folks that are going to present this evening, because I think it'll be really beneficial for your future career. So that's the kind of the history of our partnership. That's the opportunity.
Just so you know, Microsoft does help pay for that as well. Since I've been at Microsoft, I've worked on many products. I've worked on Microsoft Money back in the day when we had, online banking was a product and it wasn't on a website. I work with even competitors and banks to develop the first online protocol to communicate between products and banks. Then I worked on MSN for a while. Then I moved over. If any one of you, I hope all of you use Outlook. I did the spam filter. I was the dev manager of the spam filter that's in Outlook, Hotmail, and Exchange Server. From there, I did anti-phishing. So if you use Internet Explorer, the smart screen filter that protects against phishing in IE, I worked on that. I did parental controls for a while. And then I moved over to antivirus. So I was on the antivirus team, so Windows Defender. So if you use Windows, well, Windows Defender is on your machine as well. So I worked on that. I was a dev manager of that product as well. And then eventually I moved over to the Intune team, and I've been on Intune now for about 9 years. I can keep going. Any questions you want to ask, Will, or you want to just I can keep checking?
I love the story, and I'm always curious because a lot of people don't realize, but I'm also a software engineer. And when you mentioned Commodore 64, I had a Commodore 64 growing up, and I learned to program on it because I didn't have a hard drive.
Yep.
So every time I wanted to do anything, I had to write code. So I'm kind of curious: is you were coding before you actually went to college?
Oh yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. And I mean, we have so many software engineers that are on the call. I'm going to be kind of curious to hear about your transition from, and how it plays into Microsoft, your transition from software development into management. And then as you transition, how involved were you still in coding? I think that would be interesting.
Okay, so I started coding in early years. I was pretty young. Started doing Commodore 64, mostly to stay out of trouble. So I stayed at home and I was in my room coding. And then so throughout high school, I coded throughout high school. I spent all my time, a lot of time in the computer lab at school, which was really fun. So then once college came around, it's time to go to college. I decided I want to go into computers. At the time, this was before computer science was the big thing, engineers got paid more than computer scientists. So I went and got a degree in computer engineering thinking I'd get paid more than computer science. So I got a degree in electrical and computer engineering, which is basically hardware. And I have not touched hardware at work since the day I graduated. But that was my thinking at the time. Slightly flawed, but it turned out well. And then once I got to Microsoft again, I went to got a degree in software engineering. While I was there, it kind of happened by accident. One day, my manager, said, "Hey, I'm leaving the company, and I think they're going to give you my job." So that transitioned me into management at the time. This was a really long time. This was 22 years ago. Things have changed now. There's a it doesn't happen by accident anymore, has that? But it's been a great experience. So I love growing people. I love managing folks. I love there's so much more I can get done through a team than I can alone. I still do code on the side. I write Android apps in my free time. So yeah.
But as a manager, when you first transitioned over, did you still have to keep your hands in the code for the projects that you were managing?
At the time, yes. Right now I'm a manager of managers. So now I don't do time coding, but I still do design. I still do design reviews. I'm still involved in that area. Okay. I do not code anymore at work.
Okay.
As one of my directs told me a long time ago, he said, I'd rather code it myself because you're going to get busy with meetings and you're not going to be able to fix the bug. So I'd rather just code it myself. So I know what I'm doing, so I don't have to fix your bugs and have to come and tell you what you did wrong. Which was fine. I was okay with that. But since then, I'm still deeply technical as well. I'm definitely not a pure manager. The thing I love about Microsoft is that if you look at, you say you were to join our team, right? Let's say a college hire, or even someone hired from this event, you would report to an engineering manager, who of course is technical. That engineering manager, let's say you're on my direct team, that engineering manager will report to Alem, who is also on the call. He's very technical. He started as an engineer as well. Or you report to Michael, who's also technical. And then if you go up one level than that, you come to me. I'm still technical as well. And then you go one level above me. Our VP was a program manager, so he's technical as well. You go one more level above that, you get our another VP who was a mechanical engineering major, right? And then you go one above that, Rajesh was a PM, and you go one above that, you get to Satya, the CEO, was also a PM. So there's no pure managers anywhere in our reporting team.
Excellent. So I love to hear
cool stuff. We can't easily make stuff up.
So I love to hear about what you guys do with Intune. But before we go, for those of you that have your video on, there's no need to turn your video on, so you can shut your video off just to limit the distractions. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Derek, you can continue with to tell us a little bit about Intune.
Okay, and there's other things that I do in my outside of my role managing a team, in addition to which is what I call my day job. I'm also deeply involved in university recruiting, so I'm the recruiting champ for our division. So I coordinate all of our interns and university hires across the division. I still do interviews. I still go to universities. I usually focus on HBCUs and NSBE. I do tech talks, interviews, career fairs. I give a talk. I actually give a talk called "How to Master a Technical Interview." I know some of you may have questions about about tips and tricks for that. And even before COVID, right before COVID, I was on a tour of Atlanta. I actually did an HBCU event in HBCU Connect event in Atlanta, and then I did tech talks at Clark, Morehouse, and Spelman. I also do international interview events, and then within the company, I do one-on-one mentoring, usually focused on our diverse employees as well. So that's kind of enough about me. Let me talk a little bit more about MEM. So MEM is Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and that is the team that we all work on. It is a product that we sell to companies, and I usually describe, and people think it's something we use internal for our own IT department, which we do, but at the same time, it is a product that we sell broadly. What it does is the product is meant to help companies, IT departments manage devices in their org, whether it's managing PCs, managing Android, iOS, or any other mobile devices. You have tools to monitor, protect data. For example, one of our features is you can on a corporate owned device, or even on a personal device, you can enroll the device into our product. If the device is lost, you can call your IT department. They can wipe all the corporate data off your device without ever touching any of your personal information or your personal pictures in case you happen to find your phone again. So that's Endpoint Manager is a broad set of products that we use to manage PCs and mobile devices. And as part of that, we have a couple of different products. The two teams that are talking here is Microsoft Intune, MEM Intune, which is a 100% cloud-based service to do everything that I mentioned. You can do things like if you wanted to deploy an application to your entire company or a certain line of business app to a certain department, a few clicks in a web-based console, and that can be deployed to all devices. You can do it to Windows, iOS, and Android, for example. And then we have Configuration Manager, which is our on-premise version of the same, with most of the same functionality, if not more, to deal with. And that's not totally cloud-based. That one is mostly on-premise, but it connects also to Intune, so you can still online enable and web enable some of that functionality as well. And that's what our product is.
So I know most of the opportunities are in Atlanta, right? So is there a strategic reason why that particular team is building out in Atlanta?
So we actually have a few locations. So the MEM team, we have our biggest location, of course, is in Redmond, but we also have a team in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a team in Utah. We have a growing small team in China, and now we're branching into Atlanta.
Excellent.
We're about 20 engineers in Atlanta with plans to grow that team over time.
Excellent. And so within Intune, Microsoft Endpoint Manager is just one of the products within Intune.
Well, it's the other way around. Endpoint Manager is the overall product, and then we have MEM Intune, we have MEM Configuration Manager, and we have a few other products in there as well. But for the Atlanta site, we're hiring for both Configuration Manager and Intune.
Excellent. Well, very excited. Appreciate you. So for everybody that's tuned into this event right now, Derek actually reached out to me to help put this event together. So these are, like I said, these are real opportunities. People are going to have interviews. People are going to get opportunities to be hired. And like, this is super exciting because as we know that people typically associate job opportunities with Microsoft as being, we have to relocate to the West Coast, right? But this opportunity, they're building out a team in Atlanta, heavy software engineering. So do you want to speak a little bit to, the software engineering? Are there differences in the types of engineers you're looking for? And then are there any other opportunities worth mentioning?
So I'll talk a little bit more about our branching to Atlanta. So Microsoft as a whole, we're branching into Atlanta. And we already have we have employees there now. I think we have around 200 employees or something there at this point. But we leased, and we announced a few months ago that Microsoft in Atlanta announced that we leased a brand new building, 500,000 square foot building in the Atlantic Station area, I believe, and 500 new jobs. So we're not the only team moving into Atlanta. There are several other teams that are moving to Atlanta as well, with all type of roles: software engineering, program manager, support. There's quite a few teams with various roles that will be coming to Atlanta. So there will be other opportunities as well. As far as what we're looking for engineers of all levels, from our junior engineers all the way to our principal engineers. We're looking for we need a well-rounded team. And what I would suggest here is one thing we can do is we could get more questions from me. We can do that. Otherwise, I'd like to hand it over to Alem and Michael and Michael Kierden, who are leading those two teams in Atlanta.
Great. Yeah. Actually, I had one question for you before we go, because I'm gonna ask, just as part of getting to know everybody, right? What is a day in the life like for you at Microsoft?
For me?
Yes.
It changes daily. It's everything from most of my job, my responsibility is strategy, whether it's technical strategy, product strategy, how do we put the right engineers on the right feature sets. We are a very customer-focused team, a very customer-focused set of products, where we get feedback from our existing customers and new potential customers that really want to know that we can meet their needs. And every company has different needs. So these companies come to us, we have our own ideas of features, but we get feature ideas from them. So from there, we have to prioritize those asks. And from there, it's a matter of placing the right teams on the right products, on the right features at the right time, on the right schedules. So I spend a lot of time doing that. But it's managing by, and again, I don't manage individual ICs and what they work on. But for example, Alem, I'd say, I have several group engineering managers like Alem and Michael, where, hey, we have this new feature, we think it's going to be pretty big. I can say, hey, this is now your responsibility, and then the responsibility of resourcing it flows down. So I spend a lot of time, most of my time, doing resource management and prioritization.
Excellent. So, so for everybody out there that's listening or tuned in, right? So I consider Derek a success story. So you got an African-American male right here who's from starting out as a software engineer to now being a leader and a principal within Microsoft. And so what I'm hoping is some of you guys get hired, and there's some more Dereks out there, in the candidate pool. So, so thank you, Derek. Appreciate you sharing more information about the opportunities. And with that, let me introduce our next speaker. All right, so our next speaker is going to be Alem. So Alem is a principal group engineering manager, originally from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. 13-year veteran of Microsoft, and some of his past roles include teaching, being a software engineer, and also being a software engineering manager. So Alem, if you're ready, you can go ahead and turn on your video, and then I'll turn the slides back off.
All right. Thanks, Will. I have my video on. Can you hear me and see me?
Yep.
Great.
Good to go.
Thanks again, Will. So maybe a little about me. Will already mentioned, right out of college, my first job was modeled after my parents. Both of my parents are educators. I joke, my dad used to tell us math puzzles as a bedtime story. Pretty education-focused parents. So my first job and two of my brother's first jobs out of college was being, college instructors. And then I eventually landed in the US to do my master's in CS. My first degree is in electrical and computer engineering. That was fun. I was more interested in CS. So I ended up doing my computer science here. And lucky for me, my older brother was a Microsoftie by the time I graduated and was looking for a job. So moved out here, crashed on his couch, looked for a job, and I was able to land one at Microsoft. I've been with 3 organizations in Microsoft. The first one dealt with security standard and security response. There was an initiative called Secure Windows Initiative, SWI for short. So this was an internal standard and internal set of tools, which any product shipping out of Microsoft goes through these standards, go through the validations, and gets the stamp to be, show ready. And then I switched to phone because that was the thing. Windows Phone was still something that Microsoft is pushing. It was a cool product. Unfortunately, we didn't win the market, but still a good product to work on. And then I was looking for something different. Back then, Derek was my mentor. He had a role in his team, and figured, okay, I'll go try in this Derek's org. And it's been 8 years now, I think, or 7 years. Throughout that, I went from what we call an individual contributor, where you don't manage, you don't manage people, you do engineering work. I've gone from an engineering 1 to senior principal and so on. Then I felt like I could do more with more resources to drive a goal. And opportunity came to lead a team, still under Derek. Then I led a team, then eventually grew to be what we call a group engineering manager. So there is individual contributors, then managers which manage one team, then the group engineering managers, directors, VPs, and so on. So that's the role I'm filling now. Half of the team we're building in Atlanta between me and Michael Keratin. One of the team will be one of those M1 teams that will be working on a feature set that my organization is going to drive. It is remote, if you will, but same responsibility as any other team here. That team will be responsible for an end-to-end scenario where you own it from the user experience down to storage, including operating, sustaining the service, and so on and so forth. We're a software as a service solution in the Intune side of the stack. So the supporting and deploying the service is also part of the fun thing you do as a scenario owner. Just to add to what Derek had said earlier, we're about deploying apps, about deploying policies and things like that. But when you step back, and one of the things which hit me especially when COVID came, school had to shut down and go online. Healthcare had to shut down and do something online. And a lot of industries had to transition how they conduct business. And through that, obviously, your ability to deploy this productivity at scale was important. And solutions such as MEM is one of those key tool sets that you need to deliver that. And we operated in that first responder mindset, enabled a lot of educations at tremendous scale. Sometimes we rolled over and recovered well. That was a good learning to go to, and I think we're going through that learning of you're not just an IT solution, you're sometimes a little bit of a utility in enabling all of these day-to-day businesses of other organizations. So yeah, I'm excited to onboard the Atlanta team. Where, like Derek was saying, we're hiring from junior to principal level engineers, full stack devs, and typically the first couple of months or so will inevitably be learning. And that's what we invest on as a team, right? As long as the capacity, the potential is there, the team is more than willing to invest and coach you and get you up to speed.
Speaking, that was actually the first question I was going to ask you, because a lot of times when we're dealing with candidates that have a software engineering background, the question is, okay, what technology does your team use, and do I need to be an expert at those technologies? Can you speak to the technologies and the software development languages that you guys use, and then also speak to what you look for as far as skills from a developer?
Gotcha. What is there? Okay. What we look for is really, do you have the fundamentals? Do you have the core skill set? The actual translation into a language is something you can pick up, and you'll inevitably pick up from time to time, even when you're here, because the technology will move, new and latest implementation of a language comes in, or a library comes in, and that learning will continue to go. As long as you can critically think through a problem, come up with a scalable solution, and you know your core fundamental CSS, and you know how to design well, how the actual language implementation is really secondary. But just so you have the context, languages we use, we're primarily a .NET shop. We use C# for majority of our code base. We do have an assorted storage technology. We have SQL. We have another one called Reliable Collection, RC, and Cosmos DB, or a document database, and each of those have their own language and library.
And then last question for you. What is a day in a life like for yourself? And I'd be curious. I'd also be curious. I know you're managing now, but I'm also curious as to your experience at Microsoft as a dev, and then also now as a manager.
As a dev, my time horizon is typically, my day is a little more predictable. My time horizon of what I plan for is in a week, 2 weeks, maybe up to a month, because I am executing a particular goal. Then as a manager, your time horizon goes from, you'll have to think about the monthly cycles or the 2 week cycle that you go through, but you also have to think, what's my team going to deliver 6 months down the road, and try to create. Well, you're managing people, so you want to create those opportunities, and you're also trying to see where the product is going and whether you're ahead of the curve or not. So a 1 month plan doesn't give you that. So your time horizon goes, and the higher up you go, that time horizon goes bigger, because the scope is bigger, and the rate of change at that level it's a big ship you're trying to steer, right? As an IC, it's typically you're steering, you're a lot more agile, and the higher the team size, the bigger the goal, it comes with the bigger time horizon.
Excellent. So as we transition to the next speaker, I want to ask you one last question, and then I'll go back to my slides as you answer that. But why do you feel Microsoft has been a great place for you to work?
For a lot of things. Great corporate citizen. You've introduced me, and I'm from Ethiopia. Microsoft has this thing called My Skills for Africa, where you can volunteer your time, your skill, go back and contribute, right? And as someone who feels I haven't contributed to where I came from, that's an awesome way to get connected. And in here, it also gives me a way to connect back to HBCU events. I go to NSB and things like that. I get the opportunity to bring the next wave of talent and help out with the culture of the organization. So it gives you room to practice whatever you're passionate about practicing. I think for that reason, I think it's been good for me.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out to present yourself and to also present your team that you're hiring, talent for. But with that, I'll go ahead and move along to Michael. So Michael is actually a principal group software engineering manager as well, originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, and a 26-year Microsoft veteran that's had quite a few interesting, careers in his path at Microsoft, from technical support engineering, escalation engineering, a premier field engineer, software developer, and an engineering manager. And I find that interesting because I see, Michael, you're from Charlotte, and we do a lot of events with Microsoft in Charlotte, and we're hiring, field engineers, escalation engineers, and technical support engineers. So I'd love to hear your story. So Michael, if you're ready, you can go ahead and turn on your video, and then I'll turn off this slide.
Oh, can you hear me?
Okay, now we can hear you. Yep.
All right, good deal. Thanks, Will. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Pleasure for me to be here. Let's see, where do I start? 26 years. So I guess the first thing, as you can see from my educational background, that I took a non-traditional path to the role that I'm in now. And so out of college, I went back to Charlotte, and I started working as a paralegal in a law firm. And so the plan was to actually go to law school. And one of my good friends out of college from Chapel Hill actually started out at Microsoft in Charlotte, and he gave me a call and said, "Hey, Microsoft, there's it's a contracting company that's hiring at Microsoft. You should interview." And I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, "Oh, I might as well give it a shot." Again, my mind is set on going to law school and becoming a lawyer. So I went to that interview. Of course, I did do some reading up and studying the night before. I went to the interview, and they actually offered me a job right on the spot. So I worked for a contracting company for a year, and then after that year, Microsoft actually made an offer for a permanent position within Microsoft. So I started out my journey as a support engineer in Microsoft, and I've actually been in the system management place, or the product that would become configuration manager, for over 25 years. So I've actually been in the same space, but as you noted, doing different jobs. And so my path to software engineering is unique in that once you get stuck on an issue, with customers, we could email an alias and you would get some assistance. And so I will never forget, there was this guy from Texas in the support organization, and every time someone would send out a question, he would always respond. And it was either the right answer, or it was, it would give you a good direction to go in. And I remember thinking to myself, how is this guy answering all of these questions? And as it turns out, he actually had access to the source code. And so he was actually, taking log lines, reverse engineering, and giving out answers. And so I was like, I think I can do that. And so that kind of set me down the path of reverse engineering. I went from that. That led to me starting to do, user mode debug, kernel mode debug, which evolved into now going to find, code defects in products. And then that led me into actually, okay, now I found a bug, how can I fix it? And then that got me on the path of, starting to engineer fixes. So everything on the software engineering path for me has been self-taught. And so it's just amazing of where I've started from and gotten to. Yeah.
No, that's impressive. That's very impressive. And the thing I like about it, and the thing I think that people can learn from this, for all the candidates out there, is that, so Michael took the initiative, but then obviously Microsoft allowed you to kind of grow, right? So it wasn't, you have some places where you can take the initiative, you can learn some things, but then you can't utilize those things you learn, and the company might not allow you to grow because you don't have a computer science degree or computer engineering degree, right? So the thing to note from that, and I've seen this over time and time again, as we've worked with Microsoft, I've seen that. And so that speaks highly of Microsoft as a company, speaks highly of you taking the initiative to do that. So I find that super interesting. So sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's good. Yeah. And so, it just went from that and continued to build upon those building blocks. My scope of influence continued to grow, which, kind of led me into the leadership path, right? It became more about, okay, now that I've soaked up all this knowledge, how can I, get this to other people? How can I help them, achieve the same type of goals that I have set for myself? And so that led me down, the management path. And so right now, I currently manage 13 full-time engineers, 40 vendors, and we're spread out over Charlotte, Redmond, and China. So Shanghai I have a team there as well. And as Alem and Derek mentioned, we're looking to grow the team here in Atlanta. Again, the goal is to build a diverse team, complete autonomy, feature team, so they'll own key features of Configuration Manager end to end. So they'll be able to do, all of the design work through to implementation, and then ultimately shipping new features.
So what is a typical day in the life like for you, within your current role?
Yeah, so my days are, and like there's, it depends, right? My team owns a few different businesses, right? So there's a sustained engineering part of the business, and so we're responsible for, not that we ever ship any bugs in a product, but if we did, my team would be responsible for shipping any hot fixes, either out of band or in a cumulative roll-up. And so part of my day is looking in on that business, making sure that, if we actually have any issues that we need to fix, that we're actually getting them out. And then we do new features, right? So net new value to the product. And so part of the day could be working with development leads on, whatever features that we're shipping in the next version, making sure everything's on schedule, making sure we have the right design principles, et cetera. We also work closely with our support organization. So if there are any customers that are having any technical challenges, technical issues, and we need to lean in, we certainly can do that. So there's a reactive part of my job, putting out those types of fires. And then last but not least is our community outreach program. So we're definitely in touch with our customers, whether it be in forums, blogs, feedback channels. So just making sure that we have a close connection with our customers and making the changes that we need to make in our products to make them happy and satisfied.
So for those of you that just joined in, make sure to mute your microphones. But Michael, I had another question that I think some candidates might be wondering. So can you speak to, from a high level, the difference between your team and who you're looking to hire versus Alem's team?
Really, the core is the same. I mean, the products, if you will, kind of are designed to solve the same problems, right? They're about endpoint protection, endpoint management, securing devices. We do it primarily on premises. Intune does it in the cloud. But the skill sets that we're hiring for are the same: full stack developers, software engineers, from all levels. We're looking for definitely, hire for potential, looking for people that drive for results, passionate about technology, all of those things.
So last but not least on my list of questions for you, as what I like to do is have candidates get to know you better, so that when they ask questions, they might have some questions for specific team members. But while I prepare for the slides for the next person, if you could answer for me, for you, what is it that you like most about working for Microsoft?
I would say for me, it's the people. And I've essentially grown, 26 years, right? I've kind of grown up in the company, right? And all along the way, everybody has always been helpful. Sometimes you have environments where people will learn stuff and they want to hold information to themselves. And I don't see that at all within our team, and definitely not within the culture of Microsoft. And so the people, I think, is the biggest thing for me. Absolutely.
Excellent. So thank you, Michael. And with that, we'll get ready to move on to our next speaker. But before we move on, and to your last point, Michael, that's something that over the years I've come to appreciate about Microsoft as well. I often tell the story. Now, HBCU Connect does work for Microsoft. But before I started HBCU Connect as a software engineer, I had to make a decision. And I almost went to work for Microsoft. I had an offer from Microsoft for a software engineering position, and the only reason I didn't take it is because I had started. I had this baby HBCU Connect. I started and I wanted to run with it. But now, full circle. Now HBCU Connect is working for Microsoft, and I've come to see that time and time again. that people really appreciate that about Microsoft. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and move on to our next speaker. So Cammie, if you are ready, you can take over the controls, and then but actually before, so Cammie is a software engineer on the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Intune team, actually from the Washington area, with a computer science background, just recently hired with Microsoft within a little bit over a year ago, and in the past role as a software engineer at Dell EMC. So Cammie, if you're ready, I'll pass it over to you.
Sounds good. Yeah. All righty. Can y'all see me?
Yep.
Yep, you're good.
Sounds good. All right. So yeah, my name is Cammie Smith. I am not really born and raised from Silverdale. I was actually a Navy brat when I was a young kid, and we lived in Japan and Iceland, and we ended up, my dad retired in 2004, and we settled in Silverdale, Washington, which is, there's a, Redmond is here. Let's see, Redmond's here. If you jump the water, that's Silverdale. It's like a tiny town. And yeah, we lived here pretty much ever since then. I went to college at Washington State University, go Cougs, on the other side of the state, and then graduated in 2017. And actually, I didn't come immediately to Microsoft. I actually went to Dell EMC because I did 2 internships there. And worked there for a couple years in a very, very different space than I work now. Like there, I was working on Linux systems and authentication and identity management. And then I made a very big leap coming to Microsoft last year. And yeah, now I work in Intune on the modern deployment team. Our primary product is called Autopilot. It basically makes it so that IT admins can pre-configure Windows devices from pretty much Intune, so that when the actual device goes to the person, they literally just have to turn it on and do nothing else, and then they can use it. So that's our product. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is to me.
So I find it super interesting, and I think a lot of candidates will find it interesting that you're coming in as a developer. So what are some of the differences between your last job as a developer and then coming on as a developer at Microsoft? And then how did you get your foot in the door?
Okay. So first I'll start with the differences. So my last job had more kind of a small business or was it a startup type of feel? It wasn't a startup. It was like Dell's big company, but their engineering systems were not really as well established, and things were just done differently. The company culture wasn't very clear. There was no real singular vision for just a culture for work environment. And it additionally, like things like diversity and inclusion and things like that weren't really important at the company level. So that was a huge difference coming to Microsoft because, and it's funny because I actually didn't have any frame of reference. That was my first job, so I didn't have a frame of reference. I was like, oh, I guess this is the tech industry. Nobody cares about diversity. But then I came to Microsoft and I was blown away with how, especially Intune, oh my gosh, just how welcome and open everyone is. Diversity, I'll tell you now, I've lived in Washington for the almost last 20 years of my life. And, it's as much as we want to think that it's diverse here, it's really not. So that's why it was so, and even especially my university, I didn't go to an HBCU. So in just about every single one of my engineering classes, I was generally sometimes the only woman in the class, but definitely the only Black person in the class. And it, that takes a toll on you mentally. You're thinking, why should I even do this? No one looks like me and all that stuff. But then coming to Intune and getting linked up with the rest of the Black identifying folks in Intune and seeing how many of us there are and how there's this community here, it just blew me away. I felt like for the first time in my career, I could just be some semblance of myself. I don't have to hide myself so much. And so there's that. And then also a really great part of Microsoft, I know this is kind of a buzzword, but the growth mindset, it really is here. At my last job, I was kind of just fixing bugs for 2 years. I didn't write a single feature. And then I come here, and in the first 3 months, my boss tells me, okay, you own this entire part of our feature. So basically, our autopilot, when you open up a Windows device for the first time, there's a process you go to set it up. We call it out of the box experience, or UBI. And 3 months into coming here, he gave me all of that. I own all of UBI now. And I'm like, whoa, what are you doing? I'm only 2 years into my career. So the trust is there. Like, people talk about imposter syndrome a lot, like feeling like, oh man, all these people are so smart, I don't belong here. But you do. If you make it here and you pass those interviews, like you are one of them. You are one of the smart people, and you have that agency to grow and to learn and to just develop your career. And that's the fact that that's an important pillar at Microsoft is just, it already sets Microsoft apart from my one sample set of my last job. But still, it's huge. So and I forgot the second question.
No, this is great because I think a lot of candidates, we have some experienced folks, and then we have some folks that are, about the same level as yourself. So I think they would be very interested in what it was like for you to interview at Microsoft, and then what it was like when you came on board, like those first few months. What was it like?
Okay. So interviewing, funny. I actually interviewed 3 times for Microsoft over the course of 6 months, and I got no's the first 2 times. But then I got the yes the third time. So that's a really good point. Like, if you interview and maybe it doesn't work out the first time, try again, and maybe even try in a different org. Like, I think I interviewed for Azure, and then Xbox, and then Intune was the third one, and that was a match. So you'd be surprised, like, just because one interview doesn't work out, it's not necessarily mean that you're a bad engineer. It might just be you're just not a good fit for that team. So, like, try a different team, So the whole process was pretty smooth, especially comparing to like other companies' process. It's like Microsoft is pretty expedient about it. Like, I won't mention names, but some companies like to take like 6 to 8 weeks doing those things, and Microsoft doesn't do that. So that's the bright side. Then when you get your job, when you get the offer and you have your first day, you'll have a new employee orientation on the first day. And unfortunately, in COVID, that's been happening kind of remote, so the hype isn't really there. But once we go back to being in person, it's actually like a really hyped up like experience to like you show up at the visitor center, you see the Microsoft logo, you have to take a selfie. Like, that's like required. You have to take a selfie in front of the logo. And you get your badge, you see hundreds and hundreds of other new people starting their journeys too. And it's just a really awesome first day. It's a really great introduction to the company. Then the onboarding, you'll get a buddy. Like, it's really nice, actually. I really like that we actually have onboarding buddies here, where you will get someone on your team to help you. And a lot of the time, that person actually just becomes your mentor. So it's really cool that like Microsoft makes that happen, because mentorship is so important when in this industry, in any industry, sure, but like there is not a single person. There's not a single successful person in this industry that got to where they were without help, and having somebody tell them what's up. So the fact that Microsoft gives you that right out the gate, like, that's really, really, really cool. Like, my onboarding buddy has now been my mentor for the past year. So other than that, the ramp up is very cool, or very, very comprehensive, especially in Intune. We actually have like boot camps about twice a year, where we spend 3 days of work days, where everybody that wants to goes and piles into a big conference room, and we learn about every single part of Intune, like in and out, the architecture, all of it. So it's really cool. And even if you don't work, because there's different parts of Intune, so you won't really work on every part of it. It's still really nice to get that real comprehensive tutorial, like the real comprehensive lesson on Intune, and the fact that they do it multiple times a year, you can refresh. So yeah, I felt very prepared as starting IC to do my job. So yeah, I would say that Microsoft is very good, especially Intune specifically, is very good at setting you up for success.
So, quick question. What technologies do you work with on a day-to-day basis, and kind of like what's a day in a life? Because your story about how you gained ownership and trust to do a product from end to end, I'm sure you probably had to learn some things. Yeah. So I think it would be really cool to hear about what technologies you're working with, and what sort of a day in the life is for you as a developer.
Okay. For me, specifically, I'm a little bit special in Intune because Intune is a surface-based product. So it's all cloud and all that jazz. I actually work on the client side. I work on Windows specifically. So the biggest learning curve for me was jumping from Linux to Windows. Linux was my last job, and that's two different operating systems. They might as well just be two different planets, because that was probably the biggest learning curve for me. It was just like learning how to use Windows. But yeah, it's really cool. We get to work in the Windows core, and Ubi in particular is the UI that you go through, and that is actually in JavaScript and HTML, if you believe it. I was really shocked to find that out. And then the back end is all C++. Yeah, that's pretty much kind of most of where my ownership lies. I also do work with the Intune side. Because in the provisioning process, we have to communicate and get the provisioning packages from certain services in Intune. So I do get to work with some of that sometimes, and that's in C#. And C# is so much. I love C++, but C# is just so nice because it's just so much easier sometimes. But yeah, but yeah, those are pretty much what I work with every day.
Okay, so this has been an excellent sales pitch for Microsoft. So, this is great. But my last question as I prepare for our next speaker, so I'm going to pull up the slide for our next speaker, but I wanted to ask you, what is it that you like most about working for Microsoft?
I think you're going to see this as a trend, the people. Like it's, I think in anywhere you work in tech, there are awesome, great, interesting projects or problems to solve all over the tech space. So that's what you'll always find something interesting to work on at Microsoft. But the people and the culture and that inclusiveness and feeling like you belong here and you're smart and you deserve to be here, that is unmatched. I think so. I think for me, it's the people.
I love that because you reminded me. So we do a lot of these events with Microsoft, and as candidates come back to me and they say, "Hey, Will, thanks, for inviting me. I got hired." I like to celebrate it. So I post it on our website, I post it on LinkedIn. And what I notice is when I post, those congratulation notes on LinkedIn, I'll get a lot of replies from Microsoft team members for that person encouraging them. And just like what you just mentioned. So yeah, that's great to hear. And I appreciate you taking the time out to share your experience. So with that, I will go ahead and we'll queue up our next speaker. So our next speaker is Sangeeta, who is a Principal Group Engineering Manager, originally from Chennai, India. I hope I pronounced that right. And also is a 20-year Microsoft veteran, has held past roles in software design engineering and test, software development, and engineering management. So Sangeeta, if you're ready, I will pass the virtual microphone to you and then shut down my slides.
Hey. Thanks, Will. Hi, everybody. My name is Sangeeta, and most people call me Sangi. I'm not going to share this, but I guess this is going to go on video. If you type Sangi, it autocorrects it to danger, and I get a lot of grief out of that here at work. But like Will introduced me, I come from India, and I did all my undergrad in India, and I happened to chance upon computers. When I went and applied for college, I applied to go study chemistry. And it so happened that the college that I applied to did not have any room for any more people in the chemistry department. And they were opening a computer science department then. And they were like, would you be interested in it? We'd like you to try this out. And I was like, okay, fine. If it's not what I wanted, let's give it a shot. And that's how I chanced upon computer science, and I fell in love with it. And so I did my bachelor's in computer science and then went on to do my master's in computer applications. And while I was doing my master's in computer applications is when we were able to afford to get a computer at home. And it was Windows 95. I'm obviously dating myself, but it was Windows 95 during that time. And Microsoft used to have this where they will leave traces of the people that worked on the product in it. And, in Internet Explorer, you drag the icon into this about box and click on it, and it'll open a whole different window with names of people scrolling. And I spent hours sitting and watching that and wondering if I could be one of them. And that's kind of my dream for Microsoft started. When I finished school, I got hired to work in Honeywell. And it's right about the same time in 2000 when Microsoft opened its center in India. And given that Microsoft was in my place to work for, I applied to Microsoft India. And here in the States, Microsoft was losing a lot of people to the Silicon Valley during that time because of the dot-com boom. And when I applied to India, they asked if I'd be interested in coming and working for Redmond. And, that was awesome. No strings attached. And it was a decision that was easy to make. And that's how I landed here in Microsoft Redmond. I took my first ever flight out in my life to just come here to work for Microsoft. And it's been a dream job since. I joined in Microsoft as a design engineer in test, and my role was then to write automation and tools for the test team to be able to test all the products fast and be able to find the bugs and get them to the developers to fix. I did that for a few years, and after a few years, I figured I got a kick out of writing something that customers would use. And I'm sure this was like my own test team was my customers. I wanted to go bigger and broader and see somebody out in the world use it. And so I interviewed to being a developer, and I got a mentor. And initially I started with talking to my manager about, hey, I'm interested in doing this, and my manager supporting it and giving me a mentor in the developer area. And my mentor would give me bugs to fix from his file, and then I would work on it. And I grew into interviewing to be a developer, and then I grew in that load of becoming a dev lead, engineering manager, and now a group engineering manager. And all this time, I've been in the same space. I've been in the enterprise management space. When I joined Microsoft, I had no idea what the space was, right? And I come from India, and all I know about is Windows. And when I joined, I thought, okay, I'll go join this team. I don't know what this team is. And then in a year, I'm going to go move to doing Windows because Windows was a cool thing and it was the most important thing then. That's how I came in. And I've been here 20 years in the same space. Love the space. Love the people. The biggest kick I get out of this is the sheer impact that we bring in, right? It is, you write a feature and send it out, and you're already on millions of devices. It's impossible to get that level of impact with. It's very hard to say. You can count in your fingers things that you can get that level of impact, and solving those problems and challenges keeps me excited and motivated. Besides that, I also spearhead a few things in the organization. As a woman, when I joined Microsoft, I was one of the very few. There were a lot of times where I was the only woman in the meetings. And as I grew, I felt like there needed to be a community in our organization. So I spearheaded forming our women's community under our vice president, and it's what I needed, and it was so I because of that, and I helped create something, and now it's grown to be all the women in our org, and now I also represent the women from our org inside the broader Microsoft Women's org, and that's something I do. Other things as I feel passionate about that I pick up on. I work with Derek as part of running the intern program in our org. And, when we moved on to looking at how do we do interviewing and are we inclusive about it, I chaired and there's a lot of people who are passionate about that in our organization. So I chaired, and a few people who are interested came together, and we came up with a lot of recommendations, and we changed and we trained people. Alem's part of our task force, and so it's exciting for me to do these things besides just also delivering business impact. These are things that I care about, and having opportunities to be able to do that keeps me excited too.
Excellent. So can you speak to, are there any differences between the team that you manage and the team that Alem manages and Michael manages? Like, what's the difference with your team?
So we're all peers. We all are group engineering managers. I work partly on configuration manager, which is what Mike Kyorton was talking about, and he explained. So I work on a big part of that, and I also work on the connections that configuration manager does to the cloud, and that's where I'm focusing more and more on these days. Plus, my team also works on some of the analytics aspects of things. So we have a service out called Desktop Analytics, which will help people understand how ready enterprises are to move from one version of Windows to another version of Windows, and to create that workflow of not only just telling you, here's how ready you are and what applications are ready to be upgraded, but also connecting with Configuration Manager and giving you a workflow to create a pilot and go deploy it to the pilot, test it, and then broaden it to the organization. Those are the things that my team focuses on in the last couple of years.
So my last question for you would be, why do you feel Microsoft is a great place to work? And then, as you finish up that question, we'll go into sort of a quick panel discussion. But I would love to hear your what you like most about working for Microsoft.
I guess I would have given different answers at different phases through my journey in Microsoft. Let me talk for now. I think like top 3 things that are highest on my values list of what's important for me right now are great challenges, solving customer problems, work-life balance, because I have 2 kids, and it's very important for me to have a balance between career and family, and feeling excited and enjoy the people I work with. And for me, Microsoft's a place where I get all the 3. I've worked on various different features. I told you I work on the same space, but every so often, I can't think of a area that I've worked on for more than a few years. And every time I feel like I've been there, done that, got it, I figured it out, and I'm starting to feel like I'm ready for a challenge, all I need to do is go ask, and I've been given a new challenge. So throughout my career, I've worked on various different challenges across in the same space. So I feel extremely well challenged. And my career has been growing, have a great balance between my work life, keeping my career growing, and also having the flexibility to define how I work and times I work. And that's been excellent for me because I had both my kids in the same organization, and going through maternity and coming back and still having a really good career growing was extremely impactful for me, and I love this company for it. And right around the 10-year mark, when I came back to Microsoft, is when you're like thinking, okay, I've been here 10 years. Is this the right place for me? Should I consider? And I did consider a few other places outside Microsoft, and I interviewed. But that's when I slowed down to think, I'm usually a very impulsive person, but when you're making that big decision is when I slow down to think, is this the right thing for me? And when I never do these, but I did the pros and the cons list, and there was nothing. I'm honest. There's nothing that I could say that other place beat Microsoft out of. So more proof to saying why I'm still here after 20 years. And the last thing I said, which Cami said is going to be the theme, right? It's like world peace, like the people at Microsoft. Love it. Extremely smart people, very collaborative. It feels like everybody's got your back, and you just have to go do your best as opposed to worrying about all the other things that you don't have to worry about.
Excellent. So I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk about what you do in your Microsoft path and journey. Really appreciate it. So with that, we'll actually go ahead and you can leave your camera on. And so for the rest of the Microsoft team that's connected, if you'd like to go ahead and turn your video on, we can have a discussion really quickly. So I have a few questions that I want to bring out that some candidates have asked me to ask you guys prior to the event. And then I'll also keep my eye on the chat window because we've got we're gonna end here at 7:30 on Eastern time, I believe 4:30 your time. So we've got about 20 minutes to go. So I like to use this last 20 minutes to be a mix of my panel questions, which I'll kick off, and some questions that I see coming in from the chat. So for all the candidates that are tuned in, if you want to ask your questions in the chat as we go, I'll be reading those questions from the chat, but we'll start out with some of the panel questions that I had. So Derek, I actually wanted to kick this off with one of the most frequently asked questions, which is about the technical interview. And a lot of candidates, they've worked at a lot of different companies, and even a lot of companies like on the East Coast, they interview different than companies on the West Coast, or companies that are in software engineering and product development versus companies that use software engineers in an IT department to support, internal business. So if you can speak to the interview process for Microsoft and the technical aspects of the interview, and any hints or tips you can give candidates to be prepared.
I can do that. So, hi everyone, me again. So if you look in the further down in the chat window, I posted some kind of skills we look for. I'll do it again right now. There we go. And this is general for software engineers. We're looking for, that's supposed to be software, I guess. Cut and paste error. I can spell sometimes. We're looking for core knowledge, as Alem mentioned before, but we're looking for problem solving. So I mean, you're going to solve problems you haven't seen before. We're not looking for just pure programmers. We're really looking for folks that can, hey, here's a new problem that needs to get solved. Can you come up with a solution and then right? That's kind of the real thing we're looking for. But then, we're very customer driven. So we're looking for customer empathy. Are you excited about coding? Most of our best candidates, great candidates, love the interview process. Whether they get hired or not, they're like, this was fantastic. I learned so much. This was great. Of course you want to get hired, but my point is that's who we're looking for. People that, with Cammy's energy, right? That's what we're looking for. And I'm not saying everybody has to be Cammy, because I'm not. But my point is, we're looking for, can you write code? Can you design systems? Can you use your core knowledge, your data structures, to really come up with innovative, creative, high-performance solutions? And that's not something we're expecting everybody. It depends on your level. If you're coming at an entry level, we're just looking for, really entry level, we're looking for core CS knowledge. Can you traverse linked lists? Do you understand hash tables and data structures and stacks and queues and everything you need to do? The arsenal, I usually describe it as, there's an arsenal of stuff you need to solve problems, right? What's in your arsenal, right? And you use that arsenal every day to solve new problems that show up. That's just the way it goes. As far as, tips for interviewing, I can cut and paste some in here. Relax, be confident is number one. Being nervous is not going to help. I can guarantee that part. No matter what being nervous is not going to help. Really listen to the requirements. Listen to the description of what you've been told. Clarify. Make sure you understand. And then solve your problem. Don't code first. The biggest mistake I see people doing is candidates come in, and they go straight to code. They haven't asked enough questions. They haven't solved the problem. And eventually when I ask the question, like, what are you going to do about this? And then they start hacking it. Now I have a hacked piece of mess, right? No one wants to debug that for you, as the guy told me, right? Right. So we're looking forward, pay attention to what you're working on and really, draw diagrams, draw your diagrams, consider your test cases, and make sure you know what you're before you code it. Although you look at TV and some people start typing with once upon a time, that's not the way it happens. You already know the story in your head, right? If you don't know it, you're not going to do a good job there. And then practice, really before you get there, really practice. Practice the things you see every day. Think of a red light, a traffic light. Right? What's the logic do you think that goes in to decide when to turn green and when to turn red and when to turn yellow? Just think through some of those items. There's a bunch of online resources. There's a book called How to Crack the Technical Interview, and there's a bunch of other resources. But the real key is to practice problem solving without a dev environment, without the internet. Because when you're coding this, you're going to be, we're in person. You'd be in front of a whiteboard with a marker, right? And there is no help coming, other than conversation, and then brainstorming with your interviewer, right? It's not that hard. It's really just we're trying to figure out what right? And if you can apply what to solving a problem you haven't seen before. That's really the key, right? We don't expect you to have experience of what we work on. I didn't. I don't think anyone did. Look at Cammy was a developer on Linux, and she showed up, and she proved that she got through the interview and proved that she could apply what she knew to code. And someone said, "Oh, you're here, great, you're a problem solver. Here, own this." Right, and that was it. The last thing I'll post to chat is I happen to have this stuff because I actually give a talk, a master technical interview at HBCUs usually. So what I'm posting in the chat now is real feedback that from an individual that I hired onto my team years ago. But that's real feedback that was written after. But it shows what we're looking for. This person was a hire, and she's currently on my team. Right.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so next question is going to be for Michael. So this is more of a not such a technical question, but as your teams are growing in the Atlanta metro area, a lot of people, of course, everybody knows Atlanta, right? But what was it like to relocate to Atlanta and work for Microsoft there in Atlanta?
For me personally, it was great. Haven't had any second thoughts about it at all. And granted, I'm coming from Charlotte, North Carolina, but just to see all of the cultures, right? I mean, there's something here for everyone, whatever you're into, whether it's arts, festival, entertainment, sports, food, right? It's just endless, right? And I've been here 12, but all that Atlanta has to offer. Right? I'm always the new.
Really
The kind of
of your engineers. We go through this.
So, do you process quickly, and then Derek, I'll give you the last word.